as long as we can look back, it's thrown in its lot with us. Marijuana has been associated with human camps as far back into the Paleolithic age as we can look. And that's very interesting. That plant, its destiny and human destiny are very intertwined. And there are few plants in the world that have been as useful to human beings. It provides an edible seed, an edible oil that can be pressed out of the seed, a very important fiber in world commerce, a medicine which has been very prominent in Europe and America over the years, and finally a psychoactive drug that's used as a recreational drug by millions of people. That's a pretty powerful way for one plant to provide for human needs.
But in modern times, to merely be in the presence of this plant is a criminal offence. Millions have been and continue to be arrested. The longest and strongest fibre in the plant kingdom, Cannabis sativa, commonly called hemp, has been essential to world commerce for thousands of years. Before the mid-1800s, most ships were rigged with hemp rope and hemp sails. A 44-gun warship, like America's old Ironsides, took over 60 tons of hemp rigging, including an anchor cable over 2 feet in circumference. Also, the oakum that sealed the ship's boards and the sailors' clothing were made of hemp, as were the uniforms of soldiers and flags. The wagons of pioneer days were covered in hemp canvas. In fact, the word canvas comes from the word cannabis, which is found in ancient Sumerian and Babylonian languages 6,000 years ago. America's founding fathers, including George Washington, were keen growers of hemp, and Thomas Jefferson was probably the first hemp activist. Realizing hemp's value to the prosperity and defense of the nation, he encouraged farmers to grow hemp instead of tobacco. Today's activists rally in the thousands at annual hemp harvest festivals throughout the Western world. They make some pretty big and enthusiastic claims.
Hemp could totally replace trees as far as making paper, all paper, from fine stationery to press board, build houses from it. We could stop cutting down trees the day hemp's made legal for paper. It can replace all petroleum as far as fuel, electricity, nuclear energy.
How about a hemp hooray? Hemp hemp! Hemp hemp! Hemp hemp! All right, let's wake them up out there.
Of course, it's possible that some of these activists might have an ulterior motive, but nevertheless their claims warrant further investigation. Hemp has been the major paper-making material for most of the time since paper was discovered in China around the time of Christ. This first paper ever to be printed on, in about AD 770, is 100% hemp. By the 16th century, hemp was the material of choice for European paper makers. They made it into the finest and longest-lasting paper ever made, including the Gutenberg and King James Bibles, and many other famous works. America's Declaration of Independence was also first printed on hemp paper. Most paper of this period was made from recycled hemp canvas and old rags made from various fibres. For hundreds of millions of us today, paper is a way of life. The world consumes hundreds of thousands of tons of paper each year, and to meet this demand, hundreds of thousands of acres of forest are cut down each year. It's a worldwide crisis. In southeastern Australia, vast areas of old-growth forests are being chipped and bought by Japanese companies like Harris Daishowa. Eugene Collins is a forester turned activist.
Most of these forests take in the vicinity of 150 years to mature and to provide habitat for all the arboreals that require the hollows and things like that in them. This operation will be operating on about somewhere between 40 and 80 years, which is about half of what it takes for these forests to regenerate to their full maturity. This is basically a resource grab by an industry that's in trouble. The whole operation is a biological disaster and should be stopped immediately. There's no need to be flattening these forests. We could be doing it with alternative fibres. Hemp and Hennep are just two of them.
Mommy, Mommy, tell me about the trees. And tell me again about those fish that swam the seas. And why aren't they here for you and me? Why can't we live in harmony? They cut the trees down to the ground. They took the fish till there weren't any around. They said it was for you and me.
John Stall runs a hand paper making and printing business in Northern California. He has found that hemp stalks produce the best fine quality art paper.
Wood pulp is used for paper making not because it's suitable, simply because it's cheap. And it's a byproduct of the whole logging industry. But the available cellulose is something like 30%. It's really not very good and has to be processed with all kinds of toxic chemicals.
Since the invention of the wood paper process around the turn of the century, paper quality has deteriorated, and so has the environment.
The water that comes out of the pulp plant, out of the pulp process, has large quantities of chemicals that are potentially toxic to marine organisms that live in the bay. Those chemicals include dioxins, they include chloroform, and a whole suite of other chlorinated organic compounds. Over 2,000 have been identified.
Hemp, on the other hand, is somewhere around 77% cellulose and very few impurities, and it really is an ideal material for paper making.
Realising the problems associated with wood pulp paper, the Dutch government has launched a major research project involving 8 different research institutes to study hemp's potential as a fibre crop for paper and other uses.
I hope that this research will finally produce a process where we can use hemp to make fibers that can be used for paper and probably also other products in such a way that we will have a complete clean process and an energy efficient process that causes very little pollution, and that also will prevent the cutting down of trees somewhere else in the world. Hemp is one crop that looks promising because it is a plant that is pretty resistant to a lot of diseases, and it grows well in the Netherlands. It can be used without using pesticides, and it doesn't need very special requirements with respect to soil nutrients. It needs some fertilizer, but not that much. Normally hemp grows the best in some warmer climates than the type of climate that we have in the Netherlands, but even in the Netherlands hemp is growing pretty fast.
The Dutch are proud of their perfect crop, 3 to 4 metres in height. Commercial hemp is also well established in France, where they have licensed farmers to grow strains that are almost drug-free.
L'utilisation papotière avait réellement débuté.
Cultivation for the purpose of papermaking really began around 1960. So now there are between 3,000 and 10,000 hectares. It is used to make special paper, and in particular cigarette paper. In order to make this kind of paper, you need textile fibers that are very resilient. Hemp is one of the few plants in the world that contains fibers of a very high quality.
Et le chanvre est une des quelques plantes dans le monde qui comprennent des fibres de grande qualité.
The United Kingdom licensed commercial hemp in 1993 and is already producing a variety of hemp products, including this fine writing paper. In Australia, the Tasmanian government has allowed this experimental non-drug strain crop at the instigation of Patsy Harmson.
In Australia, we'd be very silly to let a crop like hemp go because it could solve a lot of our problems. One of our major problems is soil degradation, and just like in the old days when hemp was used to repair land after soil erosion, it could just as easily be used these days for repairing our own soil. It's a natural weed suppressant because of the way it grows. It grows on these tall, skinny stalks for good fibre, just with a thick canopy of leaves up above, and that just prevents anything underneath from being able to grow. The other beautiful thing about hemp is its long taproot, and the taproot binds the soil together. The nutrients in the hemp plant are concentrated in both the roots and the leaves and the flower head, and because if you're growing it for fibre, you're only removing the stalk, the roots stay in the ground and the leaves and the flower heads are returned to the soil, which means that you're returning most of your nutrients. You're only removing cellulose and water if you're growing it for paper or textiles. Here in Australia, we're virtually giving away our native forests at a price of, say, $70 to $80 a tonne. Hemp, on the other hand, could be a wonderful replacement and would fetch $400 at least a tonne.
Jim Young is one of the few voices in the US paper industry calling for change. He's the executive editor of Pulp and Paper magazine.
North America obviously has been blessed with an abundance of wood fiber, but the situation is changing now. We're coming to the end of the line on the virgin timber, and it's time to look at other sources of fiber to be used in the pulp and paper process here. And hemp is certainly one that should be considered for that use in future operations of our pulp and paper mills.
The federal government has recognized the need for finding alternatives to wood pulp because we're running out of trees. Way back in 1916, they published Bulletin 404 from the United States Department of Agriculture suggesting hemp as an alternative for wood pulp.